Welcome to the walkthrough video for Karniszbass. Now, you might be thinking what you just heard there doesn't sound like an instrument that would establish the low end in a piece of music, but it also does this. So that sounds more like a bass, though an unusual one. It only has 2 strings and not much range, so the pizzicato is sampled on each string across a little more than an octave. The strings are 2 bass guitar strings attached to an old pine curtain rod, or in Polish, Karnish. So the name Karniszbass sounds like it might have something to do with carnage, but it does not. And there are also, as in a lot of our instruments, muted ghost notes. The bass was built by Peter Wiczkowski and tied to a small drum, which resonated and gave it some acoustic volume. He loaned it to me to record the sample library but without the drum, so I tied it to a cajon instead. That makes slap played on the bass very percussive indeed, and this has its own ghost notes, but instead of being a separate key switch, they are the lower velocity layer under the same key switch. The bass can also be bowed, which sounds a little more normal, though bright. There are bowed shorts, also reasonably normal. Sul ponticello bowing, though, definitely gets less normal and really brings out the brightness, and the timbre differs even more from note to note. Sul ponticello shorts are especially harsh, getting downright industrial. In the original Hamlet play for which this bass was built, though, notes were never fingered on it. It was used to bow drones and harmonics. And indeed there are a lot of harmonics sampled here with separate key switches for the D and G strings, and a sort of best of harmonics key switch which tries to take the stronger or clearer sounding one closer to each pitch. Some have compared the highest harmonics here to a dentist's drill, though I don't think that's very accurate, and the people who have compared it to a coping saw are the ones who got it right. I tend to like recording a lot of techniques, but tying the curtain rod to the cajon wasn't really stable enough to allow recording things like jetta and tremolo. With the bright tone and round 1 strings, though, it does spectral scrubs with a lot of character. The instrument doesn't have much acoustic volume, and playing it, it's difficult to avoid extraneous noises. There are way too many fingering squeaks sampled, recorded separately for each string, and also mapped so that you get a different squeak depending on whether the previous MIDI note was higher or lower, plus a lot of other noises. I went through the recordings of various techniques and picked out various real incidental noises to use as samples, including lengthy samples of me just walking around the instrument before or after playing. There are also release noises recorded for the pizzicato, more on using them as release noises later, but you can also use those as their own key switch, which is arguably the most alien of sounds here. All these samples add up to over a gigabyte. Now onto the controls for the key switch patch and single articulation patches. There are also a couple of other patches with special controls we'll get to later. Dynamics are pretty simple. Mod wheel controls dynamics for longs, velocity for shorts. The instrument doesn't have much dynamic range in real life, so the only technique recorded with real dynamic layers is pizzicato, which has 3. There's a simple poly button, switch it on to play chords. The harmonic samples are long with several rebows in each sample. The rebow harmonics can be switched off to instead use the same samples with the rebows edited out for a smoother and more consistent sound. The bass is recorded with 2 mics, one picking up the brighter sound in front of the strings and one recording the darker sound from the hole in the back of the cajon. Each has its own volume, and the difference is especially stark on the brighter techniques. The width control pans the back mic to the left and the front mic right. The release volume control does what the name says, and though the releases were recorded playing very short pizzicato notes, they are also applied to the slap, bowed longs, and sul ponticello longs with a high-pass filter applied to that last one. There is also a release time. Because the bass has pretty limited range, I thought about extending it, but only extended it a bit and added a transpose control, because extending would be reusing a few lowest and highest notes for all the new extra range. The instrument has a lot of difference in timbre between neighboring notes, which is a big part of its character, and using transpose also gives you the ability to play the same notes with your choice of some very different sounds. Vibrato works pretty much like you'd expect, and there's also tremolo. Compared to most of our instruments though, the vibrato has a wider range of speeds from really, really slow to quite fast. The texture blend patch has most of the same controls and a pretty simple XY control for blending 4 long techniques. More unusual is the Harmonics blend patch, which is what you heard in the intro and which is also closest in spirit to how this bass was originally used in the Hamlet. The keyboard is split into 2, and by default you get the D string on the left and G on the right. Each string has an open string drone recorded. Each string also has the first 12 harmonics recorded. So the first harmonic for each string is on the next key above the open string note. Second harmonic is the key above that one, and so on. The pitches triggered by the keys are not half steps apart, instead each key is a higher harmonic than the one below it. After the 12, I wasn't able to get every harmonic, so some get skipped, but each string gets 7 more, even though they're not the same for the D and the G. Mod wheel blends between the left and right side. Getting a little away from what the real instrument can do in real life, but great for horror textures. Pitch bend affects only the right side but not the left, so you can have one sound bending and the other steady. The strings can also be transposed individually, so you can also have an interval different than the real instrument's fourth, or even select the same string for both the right and the left, but retuned differently. Half a step apart easily delivers dissonance. You can also have both the D and G strings on one side, and the D plus D option is the G string samples transposed down a fourth to a D and layered on top of the D string. So it's basically two different D strings at once, and this combo can be further transposed, of course. Mic width works the same way as it does in the other patches, but there's also a string width control which pans the left side modestly to the left and right side to the right. If you have both strings selected on side, the string width also pans the D a little to the left and G a little to the right. In the middle of the range, there are a few notes where you can play melodies built from the harmonics, sort of like the medieval tromba marina instrument. So here's that with more reverb for something less screechy than most of the last couple of minutes. Thanks for watching. Tell all your enemies that they can get Karniszbass from the Karoryfer Samples shop.